I tried it when I first got the kit upstairs in the back room, you know, all those movies that were made. And it was the most boring thing ever.
That year, the Beatles shocked the world by breaking up after only a decade of activity. But what ended the Fab Four's journey? Ringo Starr, the first to leave the group during the recording of the White Album, has revealed the never-before-seen truth about the band's demise. Are you curious about the secrets behind this breakup? Let's explore the surprising story and the hidden corners that have never been known. Longstanding cracks. On August 22, 1968, the Beatles' recording sessions for their self-titled album, commonly known as the White Album, took an unexpected turn as Ringo Starr became the first Beatle to walk away from the group. The departure, though temporary, exposed the fractures that would eventually lead to the band's permanent dissolution. The tension during the White Album sessions had been building for weeks. Starr later explained his departure stemmed from a combination of personal insecurity and group dynamics. "I left because I felt two things. I felt I wasn't playing great, and I also felt that the other three were happy and I was an outsider," Starr revealed in later interviews. This feeling of isolation prompted him to approach his bandmates individually. First, he visited John Lennon, who was living in Starr's Montague Square apartment with Yoko Ono. "I'm leaving the group because I'm not playing well, and I feel unloved and out of it, and you three are close," Starr told Lennon. Surprisingly, Lennon responded, "I thought it was you three." Seeking additional clarity, Starr approached Paul McCartney next, repeating his concerns about feeling excluded. To his astonishment, McCartney echoed Lennon's sentiment. "Exactly. I thought it was you three." These conversations revealed a startling truth. Each member was experiencing a sense of isolation, yet none had communicated these feelings to one another. Furthermore, specific musical disagreements may have triggered Starr's departure. According to some accounts, his frustration peaked during the recording of Back in the USA, when McCartney attempted to direct his drumming style or possibly recorded over Starr's drum track with his performance. This musical conflict, coupled with the overall tense atmosphere, pushed Starr to his breaking point. "I had left. I couldn't take it anymore. There was no magic and the relationships were terrible," Starr later reflected. "I'd come to a bad spot in life. It could have been paranoia, but I just didn't feel good." Following his departure, Starr took his family on holiday to Sardinia, where he spent time reflecting on his decision. Meanwhile, the remaining Beatles kept his departure quiet from the press, hoping for his return. Nevertheless, the band recognized Starr's importance to their sound and chemistry. After approximately 2 weeks, they sent him a heartfelt telegram that read, "You're the best rock and roll drummer in the world. Come on home. We love you." This sincere acknowledgement of his talent and value to the group persuaded Starr to reconsider. On September 3, 1968, Starr rejoined the Beatles. "We all needed that little shake-up," he later admitted. His return was marked by a touching gesture from Harrison, who had decorated Starr's drum kit with flowers that spelled out, "Welcome back, Ringo." The reconciliation allowed the band to resume work immediately, with Starr participating in filming promotional clips for Hey Jude and Revolution on September 4. Beyond the immediate relief, this reunion seemed to temporarily strengthen their bonds. As Starr noted, "When I got back to the studio, I found George had had it decked out with flowers. There were flowers everywhere. I felt good about myself again. We'd got through that little crisis and it was great." This episode, though resolved amicably, foreshadowed the deeper issues that would ultimately contribute to why the Beatles broke up. The underlying tensions, creative differences, personal conflicts, and communication problems would resurface repeatedly until the band's final split less than 2 years later. After Ringo Starr admitted he was the first to quit, who followed him, bringing the Beatles closer to breaking up? George Harrison, was he the next to quit midway through? Do you think this was a clear sign of the end of the legendary band? George Harrison quits mid-session. Just 5 months after Ringo Starr temporarily left the group, tension struck again as George Harrison became the second Beatle to walk away. The pivotal moment occurred on January 10, 1969, amid the increasingly strained Get Back sessions at Twickenham Film Studios. Harrison's frustration had been building throughout the White Album sessions in 1968, yet the January 1969 rehearsals pushed him to his breaking point. Before these sessions, Harrison had spent time with Bob Dylan and the band in Woodstock, where he was deeply impressed by their collaborative, communal approach to making music. Upon returning to the Beatles, the contrast was stark. The guitarist felt increasingly marginalized as his compositions were consistently overlooked in favor of Lennon-McCartney material. This was particularly galling as Harrison had developed several exceptional songs, including Something and All Things Must Pass, that received minimal attention from his bandmates. Once the sessions for the White Album had wrapped up the previous October, the guitarist had visited Bob Dylan and the band in Woodstock and was impressed by their collaborative, communal approach to making music. At one account of the situation, McCartney's controlling attitude during the sessions further exacerbated tensions. Then Paul couldn't see beyond himself, Harrison later told Guitar World, and he was on a roll, but in his mind everything that was going on around him was just there to accompany him. He wasn't sensitive to stepping on other people's egos or feelings. Additionally, the constant presence of film cameras, documenting their disagreements, created an uncomfortable atmosphere. They were filming us having a row. It never came to blows, but I thought, what's the point of this? Harrison later recalled. The final straw came after a heated discussion with McCartney. Michael Lindsay Hogg, who was directing the sessions, remembered, at the morning rehearsal, I could tell by his silence and withdrawal that something was simmering inside him. After the lunch break, Harrison simply announced, "See you around the clubs," and walked out. Lennon's immediate reaction revealed the depth of division within the group. "Let's get it, Eric Clapton. He's just as good and not such a headache," he suggested callously. Initially, the remaining Beatles attempted to continue without Harrison. Paul played bass into the amp, John was off, and Ringo played some weird drumming, creating what could only be described as violent jamming. Yoko Ono even positioned herself on Harrison's blue cushion and wailed over these chaotic improvisations. The first formal meeting on January 12 failed to resolve the issues, as Harrison left early without committing to rejoin. After several days of Harrison's absence, the band finally made progress during a 5-hour meeting at Ringo Starr's home on January. At a crucial meeting after his departure, George Harrison laid out his terms for his return to the band. First, the live television special, which had been planned as a culminating event, had to be scrapped altogether. He also demanded that rehearsals be moved from the vast, cold Twickenham studios to the more intimate, private space of the basement studios at Apple headquarters. However, Harrison agreed to let the camera crew continue to record the album's production, as long as it was done in more comfortable conditions. Facing the prospect of losing their guitarist permanently, the other Beatles accepted these terms. The following day, January 16, the Twickenham set was dismantled, and equipment was moved to Apple Studios at 3 Savile Row, where the group restarted rehearsals on January. Harrison's temporary departure proved consequential beyond the immediate disruption. It marked a significant step toward understanding why the Beatles broke up, highlighting the mounting creative differences and personal tensions that would ultimately lead to their dissolution. When George Harrison also left midway through the group after Ringo, the Beatles' internal rift became even more serious. But what made the group irreparable? John Lennon's divorce announcement. After both Ringo Starr and George Harrison had temporarily abandoned the group, a more definitive blow came when John Lennon quietly announced his permanent departure. On September 20, 1969, at an Apple Records meeting, Lennon dropped an unexpected bombshell to McCartney, Starr, and manager Alan Klein. "I want a divorce," effectively ending any hope of the Beatles continuing as the Fab Four. By mid-1969, Lennon had grown increasingly disillusioned with the Beatles. His creative interests had shifted dramatically, and the group's internal dynamics had become increasingly toxic. Abbey Road was still being recorded, yet Lennon was already emotionally withdrawn from the band. "It's torture every time we produce anything," Lennon later told music columnist Howard Smith in a Canadian interview. "The Beatles haven't got any magic you haven't got. We suffer like hell anytime we make anything." Lennon had been contemplating leaving since 1966, but admitted he could never step out of the palace because it was too frightening. His frustrations with McCartney had intensified, once dismissing Paul's contributions to Abbey Road as mere granny music. Moreover, Lennon resented what he perceived as the Beatles' collective sellout to commercial success. Contrary to popular belief, Yoko Ono wasn't simply the villain who broke up the band. Nonetheless, her relationship with Lennon undeniably changed the group's dynamics. Paul McCartney acknowledged this reality. "When I met Yoko, is when you meet your first woman and you leave the guys at the bar, Lennon explained in his last major interview. Ono's influence was artistically significant. McCartney noted part of her attraction was her avant-garde side, her view of things. She showed him another way to be, which was very attractive to him. Their intense relationship meant Ono was constantly present, even during recording sessions, which created tension. Yet McCartney later reflected, the guy was totally in love with her, and you've got to respect that. Ono herself rejected the notion that he alone caused the split. I don't think you could have broken up four very strong people like them, even if you tried. So there must have been something that happened within them, not an outside force at all. The pivotal moment that crystallized Lennon's decision came after his performance with the Plastic Ono Band at the Toronto Rock and Roll Revival on September. This concert, featuring Eric Clapton on guitar, marked Lennon's first major non-Beatles performance since the band's formation. The buzz was incredible, Lennon recalled. I never felt so good in my life. Everybody was with us, and leaping up and down, doing the peace sign. This taste of artistic freedom proved transformative. According to rock writer Richie York, who covered the Toronto concert, Lennon had discovered there was life beyond the Beatles. Ringo Starr himself acknowledged Toronto's significance. After the Plastic Ono Band's debut in Toronto, we had a meeting in Savile Row, where John finally brought it to its head. It was on the flight back from Toronto that Lennon told manager Alan Klein, "It's over." Comparing the feeling to his divorce for so first wife Cynthia, Lennon described the rush of adrenaline he felt making such a decisive announcement. The Beatles' story was entering its final chapter. Although John Lennon was the first to announce his divorce from the Beatles behind the scenes, it was Paul McCartney who brought the news to light. Why did Lennon remain silent while McCartney chose to speak out? Global announcement. Unlike Lennon's private departure, history officially marks April 10, 1970, as the day when the Beatles' breakup became public knowledge after Paul McCartney released a self-interview press release alongside his debut solo album, McCartney. McCartney had grown increasingly frustrated with the band's new manager, Alan Klein, whom he considered a divisive figure. He did say then he did not have any relationship with Mr. Alan Klein, Beatles' Liv's business manager, that Mr. Klein did not represent him in any way. McCartney had wanted his father-in-law, Lee Eastman, to manage the group instead, yet was outvoted 3-1 by his bandmates. Consequently, McCartney chose to announce his departure rather than maintain the facade. Klein wanted. I was fed up with hiding it, McCartney later explained. The announcement came through a questionnaire format where McCartney bluntly stated he had no plans to record with other Beatles in the future, and could not imagine writing with John Lennon again. The Daily Mirror immediately ran the headline, "Paul quits the Beatles," creating shockwaves worldwide. Yet the announcement was never intended to generate such a reaction. The world reaction was like, the Beatles have broken up, it's official. We'd known it for months, McCartney later explained. Lennon felt especially betrayed by the timing. We were all hurt McCartney didn't tell us what he was going to do, Lennon told Rolling Stone. Jesus Christ, he gets all the credit for it. I was a fool not to do what Paul did, which was use it to sell a record. McCartney became vilified as the band breaker. He was devastated at the reaction his words had caused, according to Beatles confidant Ray Connolly. Regardless of intentions, McCartney's announcement effectively derailed plans for the upcoming Let It Be album and film scheduled for May. The public response was extraordinary. CBS News reported, "The event is so momentous that historians may one day view it as a landmark in the decline of the British Empire." Fans gathered outside Apple's offices at 3 Savile Row, and by December 1970, McCartney filed a lawsuit to legally dissolve the Beatles partnership, making the split official. When Paul McCartney shocked the world by announcing the breakup of the Beatles, many believed he was the one who ended the Beatles. But was that the case? It wasn't until Ringo Starr, who seemed to be the quietest of the lot, spoke out that the truth finally came out. So what ended the Fab Four forever? The real reason, while history has often focused on the public announcement of the Beatles' split, recent statements from Ringo Starr shed light on the underlying causes that truly tore the legendary group apart. As the band's drummer who maintained relationships with all three former bandmates after the breakup, Starr offers a unique perspective on what ended the Fab Four forever. Looking back, Starr acknowledges interpersonal tensions plainly. "We didn't get along. We were four guys. We had rows. It never got in the way of the music. no matter how bad the rows got. Once the count came in, we all gave our best. Yet beyond personality clashes, Starr points to changing life priorities. Suddenly, we've got lives and I've got children, and the effort that we put in because we worked hard was starting to pale a little.
Interestingly, Starr credits McCartney's work ethic for their prolific output. Because of Paul, who was the workaholic of our band, we made a lot more records than John and I would have made.
We liked to sit around a little more, and then Paul would call, "All right, lads," and we'd go in. After Brian Epstein died in 1967, Apple Corps, intended as a tax shelter, quickly became a financial disaster. Harrison described it as rooms full of lunatics and all kinds of hangers-on. As the band struggled with business decisions, their creative vision diverged simultaneously. McCartney pushed for polished pop, while Lennon explored experimental avenues. Plus, Harrison grew increasingly frustrated as his compositions were sidelined. The most decisive factor, as Starr now acknowledges, was the management dispute. When McCartney proposed his father-in-law Lee Eston as manager, the other three Beatles chose Alan Klein despite Mick Jagger's explicit warnings about Klein's questionable practices. Harrison later admitted it was a mess, and Paul was suing us three because we had this guy managing us. In reality, McCartney's lawsuit wasn't against his bandmates but against Klein and Apple Corps. Lennon eventually fired Klein, conceding McCartney's suspicions were right. By that point, however, the damage was irreversible. The Beatles had broken up forever. Based on Ringo Starr's heartfelt and emotional revelations, what do you think about the Beatles' breakup? Was it a relief or a great regret? Please share your thoughts in the comments section below. We would love to hear from you. And don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more